Hello, and welcome back to Quick Takes with the DLC. My name is Katava King, and I'm super excited to bring to you today test-taking strategies for supporting diverse learners. For those of you who are unfamiliar with our work, the DLC, or Diverse Learners Cooperative, connects teachers and leaders with professional learning, resources, and networks to improve outcomes for diverse learners and increase teacher and leader retention. Today's mission. Today, we're going to understand how to support diverse learners with state testing. To do this, we're going to look at 3 ways to prepare them for state testing. When we say diverse learners, we mean students in special education who have ESL or multilingual learning needs. Tip number 1, we're going to talk about including test-taking strategies in your day-to-day instruction. Tip number 2, we're going to talk about practice using accommodations. And tip number 3, we're going to talk about simulating the testing environment or the testing conditions. State testing, the purpose. Why do we do state testing? Why is this a big thing every single year in schools? Well, according to the Tennessee Department of Education, state testing serves multiple objectives. The first objective is to provide feedback about students' academic progress and how it aligns with grade level expectations. Secondly, state testing gives parents and teachers a big picture perspective about how a student is progressing from grade to grade. And finally, it builds confidence and transparency about a student's readiness for post-secondary life and the workforce amongst Tennessee's colleges, universities, and employers. So these are just 3 of the multiple reasons why we do state testing here in Tennessee. For those of you who have not seen the administration window, this is a snapshot of the timeline for this school year. So take a minute, look at this and see if you're ready for your administration window. If not, no worries, you still have time. Tested subjects. Here in Tennessee, math, ELA, social studies, and science are all tested subjects. I also want to point our attention to the required ACT and SAT. If you are in a Tennessee high school, the ACT or SAT is required for graduation. So principals, teachers, parents, be sure that your students are signed up to take the ACT or SAT to fulfill their requirements for graduation. Now, let's jump into our tips. Tip number 1, include test-taking strategies in your day-to-day instruction. If you are a teacher, you're probably thinking, how can I do that? I have so many things that I have to include in my day-to-day instruction already. Well, you're probably already doing a lot of these things and you don't realize that there are test-taking strategies as well. Here are those strategies. Number 1, you want to teach students to attack the prompt. Determine what is the question asking. Okay, you want to teach students to consider all answer choices. Don't just rule out one because it looks wrong. Actually consider all choices and eliminate choices that are similar. If one answer is the same as another answer reduced and you know those answers are not correct, get rid of those. And finally, you want to have students check to ensure that what's marked on their answer sheet is actually marked or bubbled in appropriately. Sometimes students go through and look in their test booklet and write down their answers and circle them in the book or circle them on the scratch paper, but they do not put them on the bubble sheet. What's on the bubble sheet counts, and we want to be sure that students mark those appropriately. Be mindful. Teaching students a lot of strategies as opposed to a few high-level generalized strategies across multiple contents is better. You want to teach students just a few that can be used in reading, math, science, and social studies, okay? Be mindful that students with disabilities need support with generalizing strategies to new situations. So this is something that they need support with. So we want to not clog down their mind with all of the strategies that we know, but just a few of the high level strategies that they can use on any subject of the state test. Expect success. Students want to do well. They also want to seek approval from those who are important to them, whether that's a family member, a teacher, an administrator. We want to ensure that students know we have high expectations for them and they will meet those high expectations. We want to keep the bar high for students. Tip number 2, practice testing using accommodations. How many times have you as a teacher or as a leader heard students say, oh, I don't really need that, or I don't want to use those because they're shy or nervous about using accommodations in classrooms? Well, if you can practice this, then hopefully students will be able to see how impactful this can be for them on the state test. What is a testing accommodation? Well, testing accommodations are changes to the regular testing environment that allow students with disabilities to demonstrate their true aptitude on high stakes level testing, okay, or standardized exams. Here are just a few examples of testing accommodations. The first one is a human reader assigner, otherwise known as read aloud. Second, human scribe or transcription. That's when an adult writes down verbatim what a student says. Extended time, prompting upon request. That's specifically when a student needs prompting and a teacher can actually prompt them if the student requested, but they must have this indicated on their IEP or ILP as a part of their required accommodations. Okay, so these are just a few of the testing accommodations that are available to students. You want to have them practice these. Why? Why do we want to have them practice these? Well, practice puts brains in your muscles. If you are an athlete or have ever been an athlete or know of any athletes, you've probably heard coaches yelling, you want to practice the way that you want to play. Same thing goes for students in classrooms who are practicing for state testing. Practice puts brains in your muscles. You want it to become muscle memory for students. You don't want them to have do this for the first time and they get anxious or nervous because this is new to them. You want them to have it practice, have it down to memory. I would like to share just a few student quotes from when I've supported students in the past with utilizing accommodations on state tests. I'm going to read my absolute favorite one from a student that was in the 9th grade and had no idea of how beneficial this support could be. This student said, having someone read a test aloud is different from reading an assignment aloud. I'm glad that I got the chance to follow along with the real person's voice. So things like this are quotes from students that you can just make sure that they know, hey, this is a little bit different from when I read this in class, or when I write this down, I'm going to have to say verbatim what you say. So be mindful that students really appreciate the support of their accommodations when they're able to practice them and understand how they can benefit them on the state test. Tip number 3, simulate testing conditions. Walking into a freezing cold testing room with all of the desks facing one way and everyone completely silent can be kind of scary for students. Quite frankly, it can also be kind of scary for adults. So you want to be sure that students have had the opportunity to see this in action way before the state test. So that way they know what's to come, they know what the test will be like, and they're able to expect to do their absolute best. Testing conditions. So a few other ways that educators can familiarize students with the test format is supporting them with daily sample questions. What does the state test even look like? Would I know when to stop? Will I know when to keep going? How do I know that if I can't talk to my teacher? Okay. You can also provide students with regular opportunities to do a dry run of the time frame. State testing days are long, okay? State tests can be very, very, very long. And you want students to not think about all of those other things and instead just think about doing their absolute best on the test. So you want to be sure to simulate those testing conditions as much as you can. Recap. Tip number 1, include test-taking strategies in your day-to-day instruction. Don't worry, we're not trying to give you more things to do. We just want to show you how what you're doing is also really helpful for state test. Tip number 2, practice using those accommodations. Although students may be shy, you want to first let them know what accommodations they have access to and how those accommodations can benefit them during state testing time. Tip number 3, simulate those testing conditions. There's nothing worse than walking into a classroom during state testing time and the student has no idea what's happening and they are anxious or nervous about performing because they've never seen it before. You want to give them the chance to practice it. Additional resources. For those of you who are in Tennessee, you know that the Tennessee Department of Education has a site on their TM Ready account that provides tips for teachers to support students with state testing. Okay, so please feel free to check out that. Here's an article here that also has a host of things that you can do to support students with disabilities for taking state and district tests, as well as the ADA, American with Disabilities Act site has a lot of information on how to pick the best accommodations for students. And all of these resources will be linked below this video when we're done today. So if you're in the state of Tennessee, these are just a few resources that may be helpful for you to check out. Finally, thank you. If you know of someone or you are someone who would love to talk more to us about supporting students with test taking or any other things to support diverse learner students, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Again, my name is Katava King and I'm with the DOC, and we thank you for taking the time to view this quick take. Have a good rest of your day and good luck on state testing.